I'm going to show you how to cut a pattern for a flat collar like this. This is called a Peter Pan collar, but it's a flat collar because it has no stand in there to lift it up like the traditional shirt collar. Again, I'm using a very traditional shape of a Peter Pan collar, very popular with children's wear, but of course you can change this shape of the collar. You can put scallops, you can put lace in there, you can make it square, you can make it whatever. It's basically a flat collar without a stand. So the way you do that is, for this demonstration, I have drawn round the blocks, the templates, as you can see, and I've added seam allowances. So I've got a paper pattern of the blocks. I've extended out from my centre front line so that I've got a button extension to put buttons. I've notched here at the centre front line because that's where I want our collar to come to, so that when the garment is buttoned up, the collar will meet at the centre front. Now when I've added on the seams, you'll notice that I've squared them off, and so everything matches nicely, and I've made sure my notches match. So to do your collar, a flat collar, I'm going to lay my pattern, my back, centre back, along the grain of the paper, along the lines of the paper. I'm then going to put my shoulder seam together. Now I'm not putting it together like this, because that's putting the raw edges of the fabric together. I'm not putting it together like this. What you must do is you must put those sewing lines, i.e. the net lines, on top of each other, as if I've sewn it together, yeah? That's as if I've sewn the shoulder seam together. But I'm going to do a little something else. I'm just going to put my finger here at the neck edge and just swing this slightly. So, I don't know if you can see that through there, but I've just closed it over a further centimetre. Now you don't have to do that on your flat collar, but by doing that, it just gives it a little bit of roll and a little bit of lift around the neck. So I've got my neck point together, but I've just overlapped my stitch lines a centimetre. Once my pattern is in the right position, once again, I'm going to draw around my pattern. I'm going to mark here, because that's where the shoulder seam is. I'm going to continue round as far as the centre front, put a notch in. I'm going to put a mark here in the middle of that centimetre, so I can just get a shoulder line. It's just as a reference point. It's not that we're going to use it necessarily, but it just helps me line everything up and know where everything's going. So that's all I did. I put the shoulder seams together and drew around the neck. So here's my centre back. Here's my shoulder point, and this was my centre front. Now before I draw the shape of the collar, let's just understand what I've done. This is the centre back line, no seam allowance, because it's going to be on a fold. My neck, however, has seam allowance. Look, it's already on my pattern. So don't get confused. I've already got seam allowance on my pattern, so I'm just going to mark it so I don't get confused. One of the most confusing things is where's my seam? Have I put one here or haven't I? And I'm just going to gently draw that shoulder seam in, just so I've got an idea of where that shoulder falls. Here's my centre front. So now I can draw the shape of my collar. Now, let's see what this one was. This one measured, let's say by the time it's folded, 7 centimetres. So roughly speaking, I'm going to make the depth of my collar 7 centimetres. I can do it much narrower if I want to, or I can do it wider, or I can indeed shape it. Here's my centre front line. going down there. So if I imagine that my buttons are sitting here, now I can draw my shape. I can make my collar come down quite sharp, or I can make it go back at an angle. It's entirely up to you how you draw that shape. Now again, I draw by eye a lot, but if you want to use French curves, do. I'm coming from this point, not this point. This is the edge of the fabric. This is my stitch line, so this is where my centre front point will be. So I'm just going to make up a little shape at the moment, like this. Okay, there's my Peter Pan collar. Now, here's my seam allowance. I'm going to shade it in. There's my seam allowance, because I've already got it on my pattern. But this line I've drawn in is a finished line, so I'm looking at it as the finished collar. If I want to make a pattern of that, I've got to add a seam allowance on top. But before I do that, I'm just going to cut this out. I want to, oops, I'm going to square that off because it's not very square at the moment. And I'm just going to cut that out, as is. So I'm not adding a seam allowance on yet. I'm cutting it next. Just get rid of the surplus paper because it gets in the way. Cut around the neck edge. Finish off the shape here. Don't worry about that point for the minute, I'll explain that in a moment. Okay, so I've cut it out. Now, because it's such a small pattern piece, although this is on the fold, I'll write fold there so we don't get muddled up. I want to make a whole pattern piece, because it's so small. When it comes to laying it on the fabric, with small pieces you can so easily go off angle when you're laying it on, and it's much easier to have a whole pattern piece if it's little like this, and then you also can find that you slot it into spare pieces of fabric that you might have without worrying about it having to be on the fold of the fabric. You can cut it open. So I'm going to make a whole pattern, and whenever I make a whole pattern and it's symmetrical shape, I place the fold on the folded paper. Just make sure you're careful there, because if I go off slightly like this, it will change the balance of the piece that I'm cutting, or like this, or if it's slightly away, you change the fit. Make sure that when you do line up your fold lines, that it really does sit on the fold edge of the paper. Okay, and we trace off again. Oops. Okay. Shoulder, centre front. Two important notches, those are going to be. Shoulder, centre front. Now again, let's not get muddled up. We've got the seam already on there, so let's pop it on. But we haven't got a seam on this net edge, so now's the time to add it. If you're not sure of the shape of your collar, actually, this is when it's in this state, you could cut that out of a piece of fabric and just check it either on yourself or on a mannequin, just to make sure that is the shape that you want. That's the centre front, once the seam has been sewn. But I'm just going to continue it up, okay? probably continue that line off as well. What's important is, now you can square that off if you want to, so long as you have this notch. This is the important notch because it must line up with the centre front notch here. Once you've sewn round the outer edge of the collar and turned it through, then this all becomes quite irrelevant. You'll probably trim it away anyway. So on the pattern you can let it run off, but you must have this notch, and indeed you must have the shoulder notch as well. Yeah. Put the notches in. And I'm going to open it up. And because I squared off, this is all running nice and straight. And I'm also going to put a notch in on the centre. That means I can make sure when I'm sewing, the centre notch goes on the centre notch at the back of the garment and nothing gets twisted. And that's your Peter Pan collar. Again, you can either have the grain running down here, or so long as it's squared off, you can have the grain going horizontal. Often depends on your fabric or your pattern of the fabric, the print on it. Or if you're messing around with stripes, you can mess around with the stripe for the collar. Now, I just want to show you something. This top collar and this underneath collar were cut from the same pattern piece. Often what happens, because the collar comes up and over, you get the under collar showing, because the top collar has further to travel. It's got to come up and over and down, whereas the under collar is underneath, and its journey that it makes is slightly shorter. So what happens is the top collar gets eaten up, if you like, too much, and it allows the under collar to show. I was quite surprised this happens on such a thin cotton, because it usually happens on a much thicker fabric, but it has happened on the cotton. So that means we need to make two separate collars, a top collar and an under collar. Now this one that we've made will be the under collar, because it's the shape that we want finished. So we're going to make a new top collar, and we do that. Let me see if I've got enough paper. Ooh, just about. I think I've got just about enough paper. Let me see. Yes. Okay. Something that will be useful here, actually, which I haven't done, and that's just marking that shoulder angle. I'll tell you what in a moment. So that's my shoulder there. So we're doing exactly the same thing. We've got our under collar. We're placing it on the fold of the paper nice and accurately. And I'm going to draw around it. We do quite a lot of drawing around in pattern making. That's my shoulder. Now, I've done exactly the same thing. I've just drawn it around, and I've got seam allowances everywhere on this one. I have seam allowances on this one. I don't have to add any seam allowances. What I'm wanting to add is a little extra fabric, because it's got to travel a little further. And we're talking about not even half a centimetre. I'm talking about 3-4 millimetres. Again, that will depend upon the thickness of your fabric. So I'm just going to mark in seam allowances, so I know I've got them, just roughly like that. So it's not until you get to about the shoulder point, which is where we put a little bit of height in, that the roll starts to happen. So I'm just going to add 3-4 centimetres on the back of the collar, and I'm going to bring it up. There's my collar line. So it graduates away at the collar point, at the shoulder point. Did you see this bit here? That's what I've just added on. And that's the extra bit of roll I need for that top collar to come up and over and to prevent the under collar from showing. And then I would cut that out, and I would have an under collar and a top collar that's slightly larger.